Hi, just briefly an introduction to this video about biennial cropping. This is when an apple crops heavily one year but doesn't crop at all another year. And there are quite a few apples that used to be widely grown but which became apparent after several years that as the trees matured they only cropped every other year. Laxton Superb is one of them, and that's an apple people often ask me for, but it's no longer grown because it becomes biennial. And Miller's Seedling is another. So if you're not interested in that, obviously don't bother watching the rest of this. I had 20 of apples of Miller's Seedling. I grafted them all myself from an original one I obtained from a rare apple tree nursery. It's one of the rarest apples there is, but some of these apples I discovered, romantic as you might wish to be, they're rare for a good reason, and that's because they're not very useful apples. I bought this book in a second-hand bookstore. I always buy anything I can on orchards. New Forest Orchard was published in 1947, and it describes the efforts of a chap called Wyatt who planted a new orchard, and he went very heavy on Miller's Seedling. And in this book the varieties praised very heavily indeed, and that inspired me to plant quite a few of them. So this is just a warning to be careful what you read in books, and always try to triangulate information. Partly I'm putting this up to to warn people, how much you might like this channel or feel inspired by it. Be very careful about making any decisions. I cannot accept any responsibility. Try and get your information from various sources and triangulate it. But back on Miller's Seedling. What an apple! Ripe at the end of July, magnificent colour. It says ripe at the end of July. It doesn't say it's gone soft by the first week of August. Porcelain pink, flush with scarlet, sweet as honey. I would dispute that. Large, only if you thin it very heavily, and utterly reliable. Yeah, in my case, utterly reliable to crop one year and not crop at all the following year. Etc. He goes on to say the Miller's Seedling sold very freely. Well, I can't give them away. Times have changed. When Miller's Seedling, and the same argument goes for Beauty of Bath as well. That's an apple people often ask us about. In fact, we had so many requests for Beauty of Bath that we planted some, and then we couldn't sell them because they're only ripe for about 2 or 3 days. After that they go soft. Now, in the days before the globalised apple market and refrigeration gave us year-round crunchy apples of a uniform size and colour and shape, people didn't mind that, because when you got to late July, early August, you hadn't had a fresh apple for 3 or 4 months, and so Beauty of Bath and Miller's Seedling and apples like that were received with shouts of delight, but no longer, I'm afraid. Anyway, I'll just get on to this video about Miller's Seedling and why we've reduced the number we grow right down to just 2. Just a few comments about biennial cropping. This is a problem. It's genetically determined. You may be able to alter it to some extent by pruning, but maybe not. It's not a very easy problem to solve. That's when a tree will crop very heavily one year and then next year it won't crop at all. This is the variety called Miller's Seedling here on 21st of April. Here in the orchard we've actually had very early blossom this year. This is Miller's Seedling covered in blossom, and its neighbour, which is the same age and has had exactly the same treatment, has got not a single blossom on it. I assure you it's the same tree. I was there, I grafted it with my own hands and planted it. These trees are the same variety, same rootstock, same scion, same soil, same location, same treatment. One of them has will have no fruit this year. The other one is absolutely covered in blossom. Now in 2012 I confidently predict that it will be exactly the same but the other way round. It was 60 years ago, and one of the great merits of this apple Miller's Seedling is it's ripe right at the end of the school holidays, and in those days, before refrigeration and global trade were quite so developed, an apple like this was the first apple people will have tasted for 3 or 4 months. So the fact that it didn't taste that good and it had a short shelf life didn't matter then. But now that people are used to a much higher quality of apple all year round, the main thing that Miller's Seedling had going for it was that it was a very early apple. Now that benefit has disappeared, but it should be kept going for historic and genetic reasons, but we reduced our number to just 2. But here you go, just an interesting example of a biennial variety. If you're very skillful with the pruning, you may be able to get them, the fruit every year, but I wasn't able to. So if you work it out, how to get a really biennial tree into a regular annual cropping, then please tell the rest of the world, because a lot of us would love to know. Meanwhile, what's tending to happen is that trees with a biennial cropping habit, you know, just don't tend to be planted anymore. But anyway, just a little reflection from a sunlit orchard.